Hello, it's Doc Severson for the ReadySetCrypto Premium Newsletter Market Update for Sunday, January 27th. Today, we are going to analyze what's going on with the current coins that we watch, I guess the top 20 that we consider to be that are out there in the crypto space, as well as we're going to look for new opportunities that are out there. And I'm going to show you a little bit more about some of the new tools that we have in play here with ReadySetCrypto. All right, first off, let's look at Bitcoin, which is sort of the proxy de facto, I guess you'd call it almost an exchange-traded fund or an index for the larger crypto space right now. And you can just see that we keep testing the breakdown, and that gets hauled back into safety. And then we tried yesterday a little bit of a breakout above 3,700, and that got hauled right back down again. And this morning we tried to break down and that got hauled back up. So this is kind of what's happening here. We're just kind of oscillating back and forth. And this is very, very common to see when you have something that's just coiling, consolidating, resting, getting ready for the next move. Now, guys, this will not stay like this for much longer. We will start to see a fairly big move, and it'll come out of left field. This is going to be very similar, I think, to what happened here back in November, where, you know, literally we were just sitting here trying to figure out direction, trying to see if we were going to get a breakout, breakdown, or anything. And all of a sudden, one day came along, 14th of November, and it just announced and said, I'm heading down, which makes sense given that the larger time frame chart is still to the downside. Let's get it over here, right? Still to the downside. This is still a downtrend. Yes, I know this is like, we're all kind of drumming our fingers and saying, when is this ever going to be over? And I said this back here when we first announced the bear market back in early February of 2018. And I said it, I will say it again, is that the bear market will basically be over when everybody says, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And that's actually going to be the point of maximum opportunity, which is once again why most retail traders are always on the wrong side of it. Most retail traders will go long into what they feel is safe, which is back here into this rally, because again, it feels safe. Everything is euphoric. Everything is complacent. Everything feels easy. And this is when you should be nervous with things like that. And when we get to the actual bottom, this will feel like maximum danger. Now, it's hard to feel like maximum danger for a lot of people that have seen everything just basically whittled away to 80% of its former value. There's a certain element of a sunk cost effect at this point. But I believe there still will be a capitulation that occurs. At some point here, we'll see a high volume spike where people just say, that's it, I'm throwing in my cards. So we haven't done this for a while. We haven't really looked back on the old bear market from 2013 to 2015, but we kind of had this, that was the initial capitulation, was right around this level here. And you can see the volume. The volume is always the signature behind these. And this is not exactly what I would call, a lot of times I will see what I refer to as a waterfall decline, where it literally looks like it drops off the table. But the volume is always the signature. Usually when we do reach the bottom, the volume is several times what it normally is during normal price action. So what we had back there in 2013 to 2015 was really kind of almost a perfect example of what typically happens in a bear, is that we had a high volume capitulation, and then we moved into what I call the basing. So we based out for, this is the beginning of 2015 all the way through the October timeframe, before this started to break out and announced itself that saying, hey, I'm now trading above the base, I'm trading above the range. You can think of this building here as like, if you're going to build a house, you want to put a big foundation in, a big strong foundation. You want to dig that footer down there. You want to sink those in there. You want to get that concrete poured deeply into the earth and let it harden first before you start to build on top of it. And this is almost exactly what occurred back then. And that base has been good for a long period of time so far. Now, if we squeeze things in, you can kind of see a more vertical element of this. This basing pattern that's down there. And then eventually we got the, well, you know what happened from here. So right now, the way I look at this on the weekly chart is, yeah, you know, we're still in a trend. We're just setting up the next bear flag. At some point, we'll reach down here. And again, I believe any breakdown from the flag right now is going to be short-lived because we just don't have enough gas in the tank. Notice how this waited until we had a high energy node right there, which is at the end of October, before this thing really slid down. So typically this is when we're going to get our biggest movement, is when we have the most potential energy sitting here. So we don't right now, because this took a lot of energy out of the chart when it pulled down like this. And right now I'd say we're still several weeks away from the next point at which the market could go in one direction or another. Now we still need to keep in mind that this could bounce up. So what I'm thinking that we're going to have, and this is kind of consistent with what I've been talking about here, this level of energy typically does not sit here for very long. We're going to get some movement here pretty soon. And I think there's a good shot that we actually do get a tradable bounce to the upside, because that's just going to, you know, we're sort of running in this bigger pattern for right now. So there is still a very good shot that we can trade up to 4,000, maybe 4,200 or so. But I believe that that's going to be maybe it for that move, is maybe 4,200 before it comes back down in the pattern again. And by doing this, this will recharge the chart much faster than this sort of stuff. Actually, one of the slowest ways to recharge a chart is just going sideways. Actually, going back from whence it came is the faster way to recharge a chart. So this wouldn't surprise me to see some little data point doing something like this. Now, what I think we would need for this to occur is, I think we'd need the equities market to have a bad day, because right now crypto has been running in reverse correlation to the equities market. And you can see the equities market, the S&P has rallied 14% since the end of December. It's rallied 14% off of the lows. And actually, it's kind of a good sign that crypto has not dropped from this. It's sort of held steady from this. But if we do have a quick pop down to set a higher low in the equities market, I think crypto will benefit from that. We'll see a quick little pop to the upside. Okay, so as we drum our fingers and kind of wait for the movement, we're not really seeing any movement of just about anything lately. Tron is still very strong. Tron is still very strong now. This is into exhaustion, and we've already had the breakout at this level. We've already seen the breakout. We've already seen the extension up to former highs. This one is probably not a good time to be chasing after Tron right now. There are better times to do this. Also, the weekly chart is in exhaustion. So I would expect to see several weeks of backing and filling here, just sort of sideways consolidation. Doesn't have to do that. I'm just saying that's a higher probability at this point, with this energy level all the way into exhaustion. Now, in the latter half of today's video, what I'll do is I'll spend a few more minutes talking about this combination of studies, which is what we call the RSI in Laguerre time with embedded fractal energy. It's a mouthful, but it actually makes a lot of sense if you take it one step at a time. We'll get to that later on in today's video. Binance Coin is also looking good. Makes sense. Binance Coin almost is considered to be a virtual stable coin, if you will, even though it's a reference currency, but it has been exceptionally strong as of late. Right now it's in exhaustion, and I would say if we look out at the weekly chart, we're going to see the same thing. Yeah, it's approaching exhaustion, almost there. Let's go over to our screener. Now, this has been the state of the market, is that we're getting selected altcoins to take off just out of the blue. So some of these are fundamental. Sometimes we're seeing an actual business case behind something. It's either being listed out at a bigger exchange, or there's some kind of business reason why it's taken off. Okay, so one of them today lately has been Everex. So it's up 32% today, with about 5 hours left in the trading day as I'm cutting this. So let's take a closer look at this one. You can see how this one has been sort of basing for some. Oh, we have an hourly chart. That's not going to do. So let's go out to the daily chart. We can see that this has been pretty much sideways for a long period of time. Actually been in a downtrend, which has gone into basing, and this is now perhaps the beginning of the breakout on this one. Now, this one is, you can see the volume here. This is big, right? This is big. When you see volume in here, that's confirmation of the move. This is not an accident. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this one. Let's go over to the screener. I'm going to add this one to our watch list, on the swing watch list. And it probably makes a little bit of sense if I go through the swing watch list in a minute and scrub those out. All right, some of the other ones that are moving. Let's see, up token, not impressed by that. We have RL, what is this? RLC, BTC, not impressed. Waves has been very strong lately, right? But the problem with waves is that, right, nice breakout from a descending patterns break to the upside. Okay, so that's all well and good. And we had a pretty big bunch of energy on the daily chart. The problem is that we have to use our fractals here. If we go out to the weekly chart and let's pull that ugly candle off of there, we do have exhaustion still. So this is a low probability entry at this point. You don't want to be caught just jumping after scraps on this. So even though there is an entry on the daily chart, this is the whole power of the fractal system, is that you're using larger time frames. You're trading in the direction of the anchor chart swing, which you're doing. This is an uptrend on the anchor chart so far, upswing, right? So that's good, but it's at exhaustion. So you don't want to go against that. You don't want to, if you have a parent time frame, which is in exhaustion, it's kind of like the old family trip where you're sitting in the back seat as a kid. Parents are tired. They're not going to go any further. Okay, so let's go through our swing trade list here, and then I'll circle back and talk for a minute about the RSI Laguerre. So some of these have been really good lately, and they're getting a little tired right now. So this is Chainlink. Chainlink still hasn't broken trend, although this is a little bit stronger of a lower low. Let's look at the weekly chart and see if this makes sense for it to go into corrective. Not really. I mean, there's no energy deficit here. So this is still a weekly uptrend, but it looks like it's pulling back kind of hard. So we have to keep that in mind. Let's go back to the daily chart and go through our list here. We have basic attention token. I'm going to take this one off because it's just not moving. Here is waves. We talked about waves. So waves needs to do a little bit more on the larger time frame to consolidate that before we can chase after that. Here is golden. Golden is just kind of coiling sideways for an extended period of time. Let's look at the larger time frame chart and see if this makes any sense here. Not really. Don't really like the look of this one. It's just not going anywhere. So it looks like it did get a pump for a while, but we may be taking this one off fairly soon. Here's Blackcoin. This has kind of the same look as waves did, right? So descending patterns break to the upside. We're making higher highs at this point. Haven't really printed a higher low yet, but the probabilities are there for that to occur. Let's look at the weekly chart and see what's going on here. Again, we have these huge candles are just kind of distorting everything. You can see that this one is in its absolute infancy. So this one is fairly high risk that this could print a lower high and just roll over and become another lower high in the weekly chart. So this one is a little bit premature. I'm not going to spend too much time looking at this one. Here is Flow. Flow is one of the stronger ones that we've seen lately. It's in a pretty strong pullback. Now, why would it be pulling back on the daily chart? Let's check the weekly chart, and the weekly chart was hitting, just touching exhaustion. And so this is a time where you don't chase after these ones. So this one could use a few weeks of just sitting around consolidating the next move up. And the fastest way to recharge this is actually to pull back, as I've made mention. Okay, so this one is pulling back pretty hard. Probably, the swing test did not hold, so this may be pulling back a little further than we want it to. Here is Goldcoin. Goldcoin's been super strong lately, as has been gold itself. So this is a tremendous amount of energy right now on the daily chart. Let's look at the weekly chart. Weekly chart's coming out of exhaustion. This one, perhaps with a few more days, maybe another weekly candle in consolidation. This one is going to be a worthy selection. Here is Edgeless. This one on the weekly chart looks terrible. And on the daily chart has printed a lower low. We're going to be taking this one off. Here is Augur. And from a higher high, this one is pulling back really hard. So again, this is typically what's happening with a lot of these coins is they're getting the pump on good volume and then just straight back down again. So we'll keep this one on the list, but right now, if this one continues going lower, we'll take this off. Here is Agrello. So Agrello on the daily chart, again, pretty strong. We're seeing a lot of this lately, though. A lot of these formerly strong coins are getting really just distributed into. So this one is building up a tremendous amount of energy. Watch this here. So this is what you might want to watch is this trend line right there. Does that hold? Let's also check the weekly chart to see whether or not this one's in exhaustion. It is. So this is a low probability entry. Anyway, this one needs to germinate around, for a few more days. Here's Up Token. Up Token is from exhaustion, needs to consolidate a little bit longer. And then we talked about this one today, which was Everex. So a real paucity of opportunities, and this really still speaks to the larger nature of what's going on here, which is that weekly downtrend, which is kind of keeping everything down and keeping everything within a range. And it probably would help also if we weren't competing against the equity markets right now for risk capital. Okay, so let's go back to Bitcoin and let's spend a few minutes talking about this study. So for the rest of this video, if you're not interested in this, you can cut it off now, but I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes here talking about this study. Again, this study is, want to thank our member Crypto Maniac for spending some weekend time on this a week ago. And this is a study that I've been using in the equity markets and futures markets for the last 2 to 3 years or so. And this is one of the most versatile, most accurate studies that I've used. And it's pretty much about what I use right now in my day-to-day trading. So again, there's two elements to this. First of all, and let's go with red here. First of all is the yellow line. The yellow line is the choppiness index, or what we call fractal energy. Okay, so a high value indicates a lot of choppy price action, which means that the spring is wound up and we're going to see some movement here pretty soon. Here's another good example of this. We had a high level of energy here. This is where we get the movement from. High level of energy here. This is where we get the movement from, right? So we typically don't see a lot of movement as the price gets down to this area. Right, so once we're in exhaustion, this is typically where we see either consolidation as range expansion leads to range contraction, like this. So we don't want to be taking, whether it's, short entries, we don't want to be trading with the trend at this point when we have our trend in exhaustion. So that's the yellow line. The blue line here, or cyan more correctly, is it's an RSI indicator, but it's in Laguerre time. Laguerre time is not a linear time series. So most of us are thinking about a linear time series of, say, like 14, where you go 1, 2, 3, 4, and the distance between all of these is exactly the same, right? The distance between 2 days is exactly the same, and it's the same way every week, every day. Right, that's a linear time series, but Laguerre time is going to be dependent upon the price movements. So it's going to be more responsive to something that's actually moving. The idea here is that we want to be responsive as possible to something which is actually in the overbought zone and then hooking down from there. This is what we call a hook down or a hook up on something which is oversold and moving higher. So it's a simple RSI, but it's much more responsive than your typical RSI. Typical RSI 14 is horribly unresponsive, but you'll find that Laguerre study is very, very responsive, sometimes almost too much so, because you can get some false signals, as I'm sure we've gotten down here, false signals which get pulled back inside of this zone. So it is a compromise like everything else in trading. Now, Cryptomaniac has put some very interesting settings on here, and I'll walk you through just a couple of those. So first of all, the chop length, we're going to use 13, which is a compromise, and we're going to specify what is a upper energy threshold, a lower energy threshold, Are we going to highlight the upper energy crossovers and the lower energy crossovers? We're going to highlight the RSI crossovers and cross under. So let's do this. I'm going to take some of these ones off of here, and I'll show you what these mean. So first of all, let's see what an RSI cross under means. And this is another way of saying a hook down from overbought conditions. A hook down, that little red dot there is where you're seeing it actually hooked down from the overbought zone. Okay, so there's a hook down from the overbought zone. So this is what this little tick mark does. Now, if we do the opposite side, if we unclick that and do the opposite side, now we're going to be looking for the long hooks. The long hooks are from the escape from the oversold zone. So those little green dots are what these, the red and the green dots are what these guys do. Now, this one is more of a, do you have, answering the question, do you have enough energy to be able to play from this? And you can change the value or the thresholds of these. So typically what I say is a minimum energy level that I want to look at to get long is at least 55. Now you can change these to like 62 and then 55 down here. You can change these to pretty much whatever you want to. And you can also change them per the time frame. So on a weekly time frame, I might want to see at least an energy level of 45 before I will consider trading along with that. Now, there's one more thing I want to show you guys here. I'm not going to be using the smoothing, so I don't want this to be smooth. I want it to be as binary as possible, so I'm going to keep it at 1. But this is actually kind of cool. This is the coloring. So the red shows when something is actually heading down, and the green shows when something's actually heading up, when it's got positive momentum or negative momentum on the RSI. So really cool. And again, my hat's off to Crypto Maniac for his work on this. It's been excellent. And the study that we had a week ago is 10 times better now from his work. All right, guys, that is it for this weekend's report. Again, we are going to get some movement here. We're going to get some movement. Ultimately, the probabilities do favor Bitcoin breaking to the downside. However, if it breaks now, I think the possibilities are fairly limited to maybe about 3,200. If we break higher first, we may get up to 4,200, but ultimately a break higher to 4,200 will probably lead us to somewhere lower than 3,200, because at that point we'll have a lot of people leaning long, and this is when they can get hurt. Hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care.